Nacho man, yeah. I got to be a Nacho man, to be a Nacho man. I got to be a Nacho man.
Welcome, Ball Dwellers. My name is Nacho Bidness, and today we are back in Fallout 4. Welcome back to Fallout 4. I have been doing some work in Fallout 4 while I wait for the Wastelanders DLC to come out for Fallout 76. And I've got some cool stuff planned. For those of you who may be in the know, try not to spoil it for others in the comments. Hopefully, you're looking forward to that. But for today, what we're doing is answering a request from a new subscriber. His name is Tim, and I am not going to try and pronounce the last name. I'm afraid I'm going to get it very wrong. We're here at Electrical Island, where I do all of my little demonstration stuff. This is not a completed settlement or anything. This is just where I do my electrical tutorials. And we're here to talk about Tim's desire to be able to turn on a siren for 30 seconds, have it sound, and turn off, all without an external switch. And it's that last little bit about without an external switch that makes this a real challenge. And unfortunately, Tim, I don't think that this is something that can be done in the base game. However, if you are on Xbox or PC, there are two mods in particular that I highly recommend for anybody who enjoys electrical. And those are Advanced Settlement Power and Electronics. Both of them are fantastic mods, and I used both of them in this particular build that does, as far as I can tell, exactly what you described. Even better, it's a very neat and compact thing. There's one wire going to it, and that's all there is. Everything else is kind of tucked inside, and as you could hear, the siren sounded for 30 seconds, and then turned itself off and reset, and it is ready to go again. So I'm going to show how I built this using those two particular mods, and then I'm going to go into more detail as to why I don't think that this is possible in the base game. At least, I'll put it this way. I was not able to figure out how to do it. That doesn't mean that someone else is not going to be able to come along and figure it out for themselves. And if they do, I would love to hear about it in the comments, because I am always ready to learn more about electrical in Fallout 4. In the meantime, for our modded build, I've gone ahead and done some preparatory work. You can see that I have 3 delayed on switches to the right side of the screen while we wait for the build mode. And you can see that 2 of them have actually been scaled down ever so slightly using the Place Anywhere mod. Helps keep everything nice and neat and lets them sit inside of the siren tower without actually sticking out or clipping or anything like that. So again, we've got these 3 delayed on switches, all of which have been set to a 10-second delay using a terminal. Speaking of, I highly recommend setting your delay switches using a terminal and a generator in isolation. If you hook your terminal into the rest of your power grid, it will change all of the delay switches on the entire power grid. So to keep these isolated to just these 3 with these 10 seconds, I use that terminal over there in isolation. So we've got these pieces. The next thing that we're going to need is we're going to need a siren, which, regardless of whether you're using USO or the vanilla game, is going to reside in Resources Miscellaneous. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that down there. One thing I will point out here is that with the Electronics mod, one of the nice things it does is it spawns all switches in the off position, which means that I can go ahead and hook that siren up to some power over here, and it's not going to sound. However, the red light is still on, indicating that there is indeed power inside of that siren ready to be turned on. So I'm going to hook that to the first delayed on switch. I'm going to hook it to the second delayed on switch, and I'm going to hook the second to the third. This gives us a 30-second delay by having 10 seconds plus 10 seconds plus 10 seconds. The next thing that I'm going to grab, almost forgot to mention, you can see that these are insulated delayed on switches. These are available in the electronics mod, and that's one of the things that I really like about that mod, is that these insulated versions don't throw out power fields. So I'm not going to be turning on lights or doing anything that I didn't intend by using these delayed on switches in a location close to some other lights, for example, that light there. So now that we've got our insulated delayed on switches, let's get into advanced settlement power. We're going to go over to controllers and get into the triggered siren deactivator. And I'm just going to pop that on the side right there and hook that up to my last delayed on switch. So you can see how this is going to work already. You turn the siren on, wait 10 seconds, wait 10 more seconds, and wait even 10 more seconds, and then hit this siren deactivator, which actually turns off the switch. And that's all there is to it electrically. The rest of this is just trying to make it look kind of nice and neat. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to finish scaling down these delayed on switches. So just scale that down 10%, and that's going to make it fit inside of here fairly well. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the position of this particular switch. So we go to Object Properties, Copy Paste, Copy Position. What that's going to allow me to do is come over here to the next switch and paste the position of this object. And you'll see what happens is that it just moves over to where the first one was. And it looks like there's only a single switch there. And one other thing that you do have to do is grab and release things so that the wires will update. For example, that floating wire there, we'll take care of that in a second. So we're going to go Object Properties, Copy and paste that position once again. We now have all three of our delay on switches in this single location. They're exactly placed on top of each other, and that is going to allow us to have these things all be inside without clipping or texture flutters or anything like that. However, it can be difficult sometimes when these things are layered on top of each other to grab all of them individually to get the wires to update. Sometimes, though, you can do like I'm going to do here and grab the other end of that wire, grab and release, and it will update. Next, I'm just going to move my siren on top of this thing, and going to try not to worry about whether or not it's too exactly perfect, since we're just trying to hurry and do a demo here. So we place that at the location, and I didn't get it quite perfect, but it's good enough for government work. And we're going to set that siren deactivator there, place it location, grab and release so the wires update, grab and release that one so the wires for the siren update, and we're done. So we can go ahead and test it, and sure enough, that is going to sound for a full 30 seconds and then turn off. And that is the end of the easy peasy build part of the video. The rest of this is going to get fairly deep into the guts of the electrical system in Fallout 4, and if you don't feel like watching that, I don't mind, but if you decide to leave early, please do consider leaving a like. So I think that settler might have turned that siren off. I'm not sure. Settlers do run up to sirens and turn them off on occasion. So, why is it that Tim's request can't be done with the vanilla game, or at least why did it stump me? Because I spent hours and hours trying to figure this out, and I got real close. I got so close that I got to something that should have worked and would work if the game wasn't, well, if the game wasn't a Bethesda game, after all. You can see here that I have a setup where I have a siren. I've got some delay switches and some logic gates. I won't try too hard to explain exactly what all these are doing, but I finally end up with a power counter that runs a final logic gate and a light here. And that light can be a stand-in for the power supply to the siren. What happens is that when I activate the siren, these things, I don't have them on a full 10-second delay. I think I've got them on like 3 seconds, but they cycle through, and these two logic gates actually flip-flop. And when that happens, did you see that the power counter went to 1 from 0? And this light turned off. What that means is that if this light was the power supply for my siren would turn off as well, because there wouldn't be any power in it. The switch would still be in the on position, but there would be no power, and thus the siren would not sound. When I turn the siren off, the power counter switches back to 0, and the light turns on, indicating that there would in fact be power going to my siren once again, and this should work. Unfortunately, it does not. So let me go through it one last time. What I've got here is I've got an AND gate and a not AND gate. They're hooked up to a delay. They basically flip-flop so that there's constant power coming from this until we actually finish with the delay, and the light represents my power supply to the siren. So we hit the siren switch and we get these delay switches going. This last one's just like a half second, so that you can't have the logic gates flip-flop simultaneously without building some delay in there. Otherwise, the power counter will not increment. But that's it. The light is off, and if my siren was hooked up to that as its supply of power, the siren would stop sounding. And when I turn it back on, or excuse me, when I turn the switch to the off position, we've reset it. The power counter is flipped to 0, the light is on, and the siren would be ready to activate. Let's get into build mode and discuss what actually happens if we hook it up that way. So I'm going to disconnect the power from my siren to the main power over there, and I'm going to hook this light up to the siren, and you can see that the red light is on, indicating that the siren has power and is ready to be turned on. And if we exit the build mode and hit the switch, watch what happens. Delay, and then delay, and then nothing. When these two delay switches refuse to turn on, it means that the power counter does not change state, thus cutting the power to the siren. It simply doesn't work. My theory regarding what happens here is that the game senses that this is circular logic, even though it's not. On the surface, it appears to be, and the game, in an effort to protect itself from crashes, I believe that the game essentially prevents us from having circular logic that actually works. And that's really too bad and very unfortunate. But it does mean that even though everything worked correctly when I had the siren hooked up to the main power, as soon as I turned this into a loop and had the siren hooked up to the output of my gadget here and also changing states of the input, the whole thing just pukes and says it's not going to work anymore. Now, there's one other fundamental problem that this sort of setup is going to have. Let's get back into the build mode and get everything set up again. And the problem is that even if this was working the way that I think that it should work, in the way that I would expect that it would work, there's something else that the game does that not many people notice or pay attention to. And that is that the game pays attention not only to the status of switches. Let's see, so that's 0, the light's on. Yes, everything is working correctly. So the game not only pays attention to the status of switches, but it also pays attention when switches change state. So the game is watching to see if the switch is on. The game is watching to see if the switch is off. The game is also watching to see if the switch changes from off to on or on to off. Let me demonstrate that a little bit more clearly. So we've got everything set up again to where it should be working properly. And I'm going to go ahead and just simulate if everything worked the way that I wanted it to. So we get these delay switches to roll through and wait for that to turn off. And at this point, if the siren was able to be hooked to that light, what would happen would be the siren would stop sounding. The green light would turn off, but the switch would remain in the on position. And we can simulate that state of affairs by removing the power to the siren, and now we've got the same sort of thing that I was talking about here, except that for some reason that I cannot fathom, this power counter has incremented to 0. And here's another weird thing that I cannot explain. That should not cause the power counter to increment. It still had power on it, and yet when I remove power here, did you see that? It went back to 1 and my light turned off. Very strange. Nevertheless, what we've got here is we've got a lot of settlers in the way because they ran to that siren that was sounding. But my gosh, more? Really? Holy. A lot of settlers. And they should really all just go away because the siren is no longer sounding. And yep, they're putting their guns away and stuff and starting to walk in the opposite direction. Anyways, so where were we? We've got a dead input to the siren. This would be how things would be if I had everything working the way that they should, if these power counters weren't refusing to activate properly. And look what happens here. As I said, the game pays attention to when switches change state, not just whether they're on or off. With no power in this switch, me changing it from on to off as if I was trying to reset my mechanism here does not cause the power counter to increment, which would cause the light to turn on and get power back in the siren. I have not been able to find any way to have any kind of logic element, power counter, delay switch, you name it, be impacted in any meaningful way by changing the state of a switch if there's no power in it. And that ultimately is what has me thinking that, unfortunately, Tim, I don't think that your request is something that I can do. Certainly, I spent a number of hours trying, but with that limitation of no external switch, and that we would have to have the power cut to the siren, means that that switch no longer has power in it, and we're not going to be able to have any impact on any logic element with a switch with no power. So I really did try my very best at this one because it was a cool sounding gadget, and I like to figure this stuff out. When someone says it can't be done, my usual response is, screw you, hold my beer. But this time I'm stumped. So again, if anybody finds a way to do what Tim is after, I would love to hear about it in a comment. Even better, it would be great if you posted a video showing how you got it done. Otherwise, we're at the end here, and I want to say thank you very much for watching, especially if you're still watching after that long, rambling trek about what can and can't be done, in my opinion, with power in Fallout 4. So thanks again. If you liked the video, if you found the information useful, please do hit that like button. And if you did not like, I want to know why, so that I can try and do better for you next time. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. I do have some neat things coming for Fallout 4 electrical builds. I'll give you a little hint in that it's going to be something arcade based. And so yeah, if you're interested in something like that, subscribe. Otherwise, my name is Nacho Bidness, and I'm saying it's a great big wasteland out there. Let's go have fun in it.